Scientists are saying consciousness does not matter. It has no causal power. So from both ends, we are making the same mistake. One is declaring matter as causally nincompoop, no power, not relevant to be important anyway. And the other is turnabout is fair play, saying, well, no, consciousness is the one that has no relevance, no power at all. Matter is everything. We are stuck. This is where quantum physics is really making because it is still fighting a battle with the materialists, and surprisingly fighting a battle even with the traditions, because spiritual traditions have their own models. Everybody is territorial. Everybody is territorial. So we have some work to do, ladies and gentlemen. This is why we talk. This is why we have conferences. This is why I congratulate the organizers once again. Thank you for getting us together to talk about these things in a way that reconciles the two views. Why can both views be correct without denigrating the other? Why can't matter have a role and consciousness have a role? How do we even talk about two realms without succumbing to a philosophy that nobody likes, called dualism? Oh yes, in India they toiled with dualism a long time ago, but they gave it up. Because dualism really is difficult to justify, since I can ask the very simple question, how do the dual bodies interact? If you say consciousness is here, matter is here. How do consciousness and matter interact? They can't. Nothing in common. So dualism, if dualism is left out, then what's there but to take this side or that side? Quantum physics gives us the answer. Quantum physics says from the beginning that these objects that we call material objects, often we identify them something as solid. This is solid. When philosophers debate and somebody says the world is made of ideas like consciousness, materialists often just thump their foot on the ground and say, look, this is solid. How dare you talk about a nebulous concept like consciousness making up a solid? Guess what? Quantum physics says matter is also a nebulous concept called wave of possibility. Go figure. Wave of possibility. Wave you know. Wave is simple. Ocean wave, water wave, sound wave, even light wave. Simple. Wave, right? Waving. Something is changing in a periodic way. Wave. But wave of possibility? If that's not nebulous, what is? That's vague to the extreme. What is a possibility wave? But listen to this. Quantum elementary experiment. An object, electron, elementary particle. Suppose you release it here. Forget about gravity, very little force, have very little effect on the electron, we ignore it. So Newton says that the electron will stay right there. Quantum physics says no. The electron will spread like a wave, going all over the room. But if you set up electron detectors all over the room, all these detectors will not go tick, 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 showing the presence of the wave everywhere. No. Only one of the detector will go tick in one experiment. Never more than one. But if you do an identical experiment a little later on, another detector in another place may very well go tick, and so on, until you find that, well, if we do many experiments, every detector in the room is going to go tick in one experiment or another. So then light goes up in your brain, light bulb goes on, and you say, aha, this is why these waves are called wave of possibility. It's possible for the electrons to spread all over the room, but whenever we measure it, measurement brings the possibility down to one actual particle. Tomorrow I'll talk about this in more details, but this very notion that there is a wave of possibility first, before we measure or observe, then we get the solid object, then we get the electron, then we get matter. Before then, matter is a wave of possibility, residing in a domain of reality, which is beyond space and time. This is the key. We didn't recognize it at first, but now we do. We have measured it. Indeed, there is a domain through which quantum objects can communicate instantly. And it is this domain that we call the domain of potentiality. It is this domain that these waves of possibilities reside. Are you getting the idea? This matter moving in space and time is much too simplistic. It can describe machines, but it does not describe the human being. It does not describe a being that is alive, especially one that is with a brain that can think, and more. And this is the problem with scientific materialism. It misses. Add quantum physics, immediately we get another domain of reality, domain of potentiality. These waves of possibility reside there. Now we have to ask one more crucial question. Is this domain a little something else? Just these waves of possibility? Waves of possibility becomes objects of actuality. We can get objects that way. How about that subject? How do we bring in the subject? To bring in the subject, the crucial question to ask, again go back to that elementary experiment. Electrons are waves of possibility spread all over the room in possibility. Geiger counter, electron detector, measuring it, and this wave of possibility collapses all of a sudden, just becoming this little teeny object, and Geiger counter is going tick right there. But this event of collapse, it does not take place in space and time. Time and time again, scientists have tried to understand collapse as a local phenomenon. No, it does not go through space and time, which we call local phenomenon that goes through space and time. This just doesn't. And now we have discovered that there is this other domain of reality where things don't go through space and time, but things can bypass, like Bangalore, you can go to the city, you can also use the bypass, ring road. But of course, both of them are in space and time, so analogy doesn't go through quite all the way. But we have a sort of non-local bypass of space and time. You can go through space and time taking a lot of time, but electrons, when they collapse, they don't take a lot of time. They do it instantly. So that tells us that this collapse must be using the non-local bypass, without using the space and time, instantly, without signal, communication without signal. Signals take time. If you have communication without signal, you can communicate instantly, and this is what this non-local domain of reality enables you to do. But what is this really? What is this domain really about? Well, something must be doing this collapsing. Here is this object spread out all over, and then all of a sudden, it's collapsing into an object right here in this Geiger counter. How does that happen? There must be a force doing it. There must be something, mechanism, doing that. As we ask this question, and tomorrow we'll go into much more details of it, today we want to get to the science of the heart. So let me just summarize by saying, a little intrigue is good, that this is consciousness. This is the causal power of consciousness. Consciousness chooses out of the possible facets of that wave of possibility. That's one facet. Which Geiger counter will take? Which will be the recorded position of the electron? That's the job of consciousness. It chooses. It chooses. I hope you look at the implication of what that means. If we choose, if consciousness chooses from quantum possibilities, the actual events of our experience, if you let your imagination go that far and look at the healing scene, do you see the causal efficacy that each one of us has on our health? I can choose health if I want. I can also choose illness. Would somebody choose illness? Yes, I know a lot of people who chooses illness. Whole lot of people. Gives you a completely different context to look at health, disease, all these things. So coming back to consciousness and its possibilities, we need more. So far we have been talking about electron. Let's bring in the mind. Are mental objects possibilities? Yes, why not? And if we open our mind that way, then finally we can talk about this vital morphogenetic fields that Rupert Sheldrake has introduced in biology. The fields that consciousness uses to make programs that will activate the genes. Now, how does that exactly work? There is this phenomenon called cell differentiation, which is a very simple phenomenon to understand, but let me back up a little. We are all born as one cell embryo, right? One cell. And then that cell divides and divides and divides, and we have become this body. So really, it's all one cell and its replicas. So the toe cell and the brain cell have the same molecules, same DNA, same potential capacity of making the same proteins. But of course, they don't. Genes are not programmed the same way all over the body. This is Sheldrake's point. The genes in the toe cell are activated differently than the genes in the brain cell or genes in the liver cell. Morphogenetic fields are the ones that are telling which genes will activate which proteins depending on where the cell is in the body. Of course, cell is in what we call an organ. The organs of the body are very different. Different organs perform different functions. And of course, different genes are activated to make these different functions possible by making different proteins. It's all very simple. But still, these morphogenetic fields are immediately associated with every organ. You see that, don't you? Because where did the programming of the genes in an organ come from? Well, they came from these morphogenetic fields. Consciousness is using these morphogenetic fields to program the genes in that particular way to make that particular set of proteins that will be necessary for that organ to function properly. Sounds simple, but it's only simple if you include the causal power of consciousness. Otherwise, it's extremely difficult to understand. It's simple only if you allow these morphogenetic fields to work non-locally. Otherwise, it's extremely difficult to understand. How does a toe cell know that it's in the toe? How does a brain cell know that it's in the brain? It's in the top of the head. It doesn't, unless something non-local is going on. If locally a toe cell has to communicate to the brain cell to ask, where am I? It would take much, much long time. But it does so instantly. It knows as soon as it is there that it has to activate these particular genes to make these particular proteins in order for it to make a well-functioning toe. Non-locality. And biologists are being very hard-pressed, just as physical scientists are very hard-pressed to accept the concept of non-locality. But they have to, because experiments are the final arbiter of science. Experiments tell us what is correct way of thinking in science and what is not. Experiments are telling us that yes, non-locality is really true. And therefore, there is no way out. Consciousness is non-local. These morphogenetic fields, epigenetic programs are non-local. There is no doubt about it. So therefore, a very good picture comes when we assume that consciousness is the ground of being, just as the ancient rishis in India did thousands of years ago, but we add something. We say, consciousness is the ground of being in which not only matter, but also mind, vital morphogenetic fields. Throw in even a concept called supramental that Sri Aurobindo introduced. Plato called the objects of the supramental archetype, like love, beauty, justice, truth, goodness. These are archetypes. And these are the four compartments of consciousness. Imagine the ingenuity of these Indian scientists of consciousness thousands of years ago. In one of the Upanishads, they even have this concept in the form of pancha kosha, 5 bodies of consciousness. Amazing. 5th body